They stripped her of her name the night she turned 16, and no wolf came. Her father, Alpha Marcus Ravenscar of the Silver Claw Pack, stood before the bonfire with disgust carved into every line of his face. The flames rose 12 ft high, fed by pine and cedar, casting shadows that danced across 200 wolves gathered in witness. The air smelled of smoke and anticipation, and the particular cruelty of a pack waiting to see one of their own fall. Ember stood in the center of the ceremonial circle, barefoot on frozen ground, wearing the white shift every adolescent wore for their first transformation. Around her, the other 16-year-olds had already shifted, their wolves sleek and proud tails, high eyes bright with the euphoria of finally becoming whole. They circled the bonfire in a pack run their house, piercing the Wyoming night, while Ember remained human alone, her skin prickling with cold and shame. Marcus stepped forward. He moved with the fluid grace of an alpha in his prime, 58 years old, but built like a man who could still kill with his bare hands. His wolf lived just beneath his skin, visible in the gold flicker of his eyes, the way his presence compressed the air until every shifter present felt the weight of his authority pressing against their ribs. "No daughter of mine is wolfless," he said. His voice carried the double register of an alpha command, human words layered with a harmonic that rattled the marrow of every wolf in the clearing. It wasn't a statement, it was a severance. He reached for the silver locket at Ember's throat. Her mother had clasped it there when Ember was an infant, the only piece of Lyra Moon said that survived the car crash that killed her 23 years ago. Inside the locket was a photograph smaller than a thumbnail. Lyra's face, violet eyes, serene, smiled a kind of beauty that looked like it had been borrowed from old paintings of saints. Ember's hand went to the locket, instinctively protective, but Marcus's fingers closed around it first. He yanked. The chain broke. Silver links scattered across dirt like seeds that would never grow. "You are no longer Ravenscar," Marcus said. He held the locket over the bonfire. Firelight caught the engraving on the back, words Ember had traced with her fingertips every night before sleep. "Moon's daughter, Moon's light. You are nothing." He dropped it into the flames. Ember didn't scream. She wanted to. Every instinct in her body begged her to lunge forward, to reach into the fire, to save the last piece of her mother, even if it cost her the skin on her hands. But she had learned young that Marcus respected only one thing: control. Screaming was weakness. Tears were weakness. So she stood silent and watched the silver melt. Watched the photograph inside curl and blacken. Watched her mother's face disappear into ash, and something inside her melted with it. Not her heart, not exactly. But the part of her that had believed despite everything that her father might love her enough to see past her brokenness. That part turned to slag and poured out through the cracks in her foundation, leaving only bedrock behind. Cold, hard surviving. Marcus turned to the pack. "This girl is no kin of mine. No wolf of Silver Claw will speak her name, offer her shelter, or acknowledge her existence. She is exile. She is ghost. Let the human world have her, since she insists on remaining human." He reached into his jacket and pulled out $200 in 20s and a bus ticket. Portland, Oregon one way. He threw them at her feet like scraps for a stray dog. "Disappear," he said quietly. And this time the command was meant only for her. His voice stripped of the alpha harmonic, just a man speaking to the daughter he was erasing. "If you contact anyone from this pack, if you ever return to Silver Claw territory, I will kill you. Do you understand?" Ember bent and picked up the money and the ticket. Her hands didn't shake. That would come later, in the Greyhound bathroom somewhere outside Billings, when the shock finally wore off and the grief caught up. But here now, in front of 200 witnesses, she gave him nothing. "I understand," she said. Her voice came out steady, flat, the voice of a girl who had just learned that survival was the only victory left. She walked out of the circle. No one stopped her. No one said goodbye. The pack had already forgotten her, erased her as thoroughly as if she'd never been born. By the time she reached the edge of the clearing, the bonfire was behind her, and the howling had resumed, and Ember Ravenscar became a ghost. She boarded the bus to Portland 12 hours later with nothing but the clothes on her back and $300 she'd saved from 2 summers of cleaning kennels at the pack's breeding facility. She sat in the back forehead, pressed against cold glass, and watched Wyoming disappear into darkness. The bus smelled like diesel and old upholstery, and the sweat of people who had nowhere better to go. Somewhere outside Billings, she went to the bathroom and cried until she threw up. Then she washed her face, looked at herself in the cracked mirror, and made a decision. Ember Ravenscar was dead. Whoever she became next would be someone who never cried over things she couldn't change. She bought fake documents in Portland from a man who worked out of a laundromat in Old Town. $200 for a driver's license, a social security card, and a birth certificate that said her name was Emma Reyes, born in Sacramento, parents deceased, no living relatives. The documents were good enough to get her a studio apartment above a Thai grocery store and a job bussing tables at a diner that didn't ask too many questions. For the first 3 years, She wore brown contact lenses to hide the violet in her eyes. Shifters would recognize that color immediately. Lunar's bloodline rare enough to be myth, common enough to be remembered in the old stories. But humans just thought it was unusual, pretty something to compliment in the break room. By year 4, she stopped wearing the contacts. The risk was minimal. She hadn't seen another shifter in Portland, and the ones passing through were too focused on their own business to pay attention to a quiet vet tech Snorts who kept her head down. The clay wolf appeared during her first winter alone. She'd found a community art studio in Southeast Portland that offered ceramics classes on Thursday nights. $20 for 3 hours of access to wheels, kilns, and glazes, and the kind-faced instructor who didn't mind that Ember barely spoke to the other students. She sat in the back corner and worked the clay with hands that remembered the texture of forest earth, even if her mind tried to forget. The wolf was crude, lopsided, one ear slightly larger than the other, the proportions all wrong, the tail too thick. She glazed it violet because the color was in the discount bin, and she told herself it didn't mean anything. When it came out of the kiln, she almost threw it away. It was ugly, a child's art project, evidence of everything she'd lost. But she kept it, set it on the windowsill of her studio apartment facing the street, as if it were watching for something she'd stopped believing would come. 10 years later, the wolf was still there. Ember woke at 5:30 every morning in the apartment above the Thai grocery. The building was old, built in the 1920s, with walls thin enough that she could hear her neighbors' conversations, their arguments, their love-making, the particular silence of people who lived alone and talked to themselves. She learned their rhythms. The elderly man downstairs who watched game shows until 2 o'clock in the morning. The young couple on her floor who fought every Sunday like clockwork. The single mother across the hall whose baby cried at 3-hour intervals. She could hear their heartbeats too when the insomnia was bad. Not clearly, not the way a wolf would hear them, but enough to count, enough to lie awake and track the steady pulse of 30 lives stacked in aging brick, all of them unaware that the quiet woman in 3B could sense them the way a spider senses vibrations in her web. Phantom abilities, ghost instincts, a body built for a transformation that never came. Some mornings her hearing was so sharp she could count the heartbeats of the family below. Other mornings she smelled rain 40 minutes before the first drop fell. Her sense of taste was inconsistent. Coffee sometimes exploded across her tongue with notes of chocolate and burnt caramel she knew intellectually were there, but had never tasted before, and other times it was just bitter water. Her night vision came and went. Touch was the most reliable. She could feel the knot of tension in a dog's shoulders before the animal even flinched, could read fear and aggression and trust through skin contact alone. Snorts, her body kept rehearsing for a role it would never play. By 6 o'clock she was running. Forest Park stretched across the Northwest Hills, 5,000 acres of Douglas fir and hemlock and western red cedar, the largest urban forest in the United States. It was the only place in Portland that smelled right. The rest of the city reeked of exhaust and detergent, and concrete, the aggressive nothingness of a world scrubbed clean of anything wild. But the park still held earth and pine, and the mineral tang of creek water over stone. She ran the Wildwood Trail 7 miles out and 7 back, and let her mind go blank. This was the closest she got to peace, moving through trees, breathing air that tasted like memory, pretending for 90 minutes that she was something other than a woman whose body had betrayed her. The Riverbend Veterinary Clinic sat in a converted warehouse in the Pearl District, all exposed brick and industrial windows. Ember had worked there for 7 years, starting as a kennel cleaner and working her way up to senior veterinary technician. Dr. Calloway, the owner, was 63, kind-eyed with the patient demeanor of a man who'd spent 4 decades listening to animals that couldn't speak and owners who wouldn't stop. "Morning, Emma," he said when she arrived at 7:45, already in her scrubs, hair pulled back. He handed her a coffee from the shop next door, 2 creams, 1 sugar. He'd been bringing her coffee every morning for 5 years. She'd stopped protesting after the first month. "Morning," she said, and took the cup. It was still warm. She wrapped her hands around it and felt the heat seeping into her palms. Small comforts. These were the things that kept her tethered. The first patient was a terrier, with a fear of nail trims. The owner, a woman in her 70s, apologized 3 times before Ember even touched the dog. "He bit the last groomer," she said. "Broke skin, they banned him, I don't know what to do." Ember knelt and let the terrier sniff her hand. He was trembling, ears flat, tail tucked so tight it disappeared beneath his belly. She could smell the cortisol spiking in his blood, sharp and acrid, the chemical signature of an animal in distress. Slowly, she reached behind his ears and found the pressure point her mother had taught her when Ember was 6 years old, before the wolf was supposed to come, when Lyra still believed her daughter would inherit the Lunaris gifts. The terrier stilled. Not because Ember commanded it, she had no dominance to impose, but because something in her touch carried a frequency animals trusted. The trembling stopped. His heart rate slowed. He leaned into her palm. "Easy, buddy," she murmured. "I've got you." She trimmed his nails in 4 minutes. He didn't flinch once. The owner cried. Dr. Calloway watched from his desk, shaking his head in quiet amazement. 7 years, he said, and I've never seen you fail. Ember said nothing. Failure wasn't something she allowed herself to consider. By noon, she'd seen 12 patients, a cat with a urinary blockage, a rabbit with overgrown teeth, a Labrador with an ear infection that smelled like yeast and rot, a parakeet with a broken wing. She moved through the work with the efficiency of someone who'd learned that staying busy was the best defense against thinking. Lunch was a protein bar eaten standing up in the break room. She scrolled through her phone without reading anything. Social media was full of people living lives that required explanations, histories, family photographs. She had none of those things. Her feed was blank, a void she refreshed out of habit. The elderly homeless man was waiting on the bench outside when she left for her afternoon break. He was there most days, feeding pigeons from a bag of stale bread, his shopping cart parked beside him like a loyal dog. Ember didn't know his name. She'd never asked. But she brought him a sandwich twice a week, turkey and Swiss from the deli across the street, and he accepted it with a dignity that suggested he'd once been someone who gave instead of received. "You look tired, Miss Emma," he said. His voice was rough-weathered, the voice of a man who'd spent too many winters outside. "Snort's long morning," she said, handing him the sandwich. "You always look like you're waiting for something," he said, unwrapping the sandwich with careful hands. "Like you're standing at a bus stop, but you don't know which bus is yours." Ember sat down beside him. The bench was cold. The pigeons scattered, then returned pecking at crumbs. "Maybe I stopped waiting a long time ago," she said. "No," the man said, chewing thoughtfully. "You're still waiting, you just don't want to admit it." She didn't answer. There was nothing to say to that. The clay wolf sat on the windowsill when she got home that night, exactly where it had been for 10 years. She'd offered to move it once during a cleaning frenzy in year 3, but the moment she picked it up, her chest had seized with panic so profound she'd nearly dropped it. So it stayed, facing the window, watching the street, a silent companion made of kiln-fired earth and a grief she couldn't name. She set her bag down and stood in front of it, studying the glaze, violet catching the last of the daylight. The left ear was chipped from a move between apartments in year 6. The tail had a hairline crack she'd never noticed before running from base to tip like a fault line. "Still here," she said to it quietly. "Still waiting." The wolf said nothing. It never did. At night she dreamed of forests, always the same forest, black pines so tall their tops disappeared into darkness, a moon so full and bright it turned the world silver, and running, 4 legs instead of 2, muscles moving in perfect rhythm, breath coming easy, the ground disappearing beneath her paws. In the dream, she had a wolf. In the dreams, she was whole. She always woke gasping, her fingernails embedded in the mattress, her canines aching with a sharpness that vanished the moment she opened her eyes. The phantom wolf inside her chest would throw itself against the walls of its absence, howling for a transformation that would never come, and then collapse back into silence. The dreams were getting worse, more vivid, more insistent, as if the thing inside her was growing restless with its captivity. Sunday was her ritual. She woke early, skipped the run, and took the bus to Washington Park. The rose garden was empty at 7 o'clock in the morning, the paths damp with dew, the air clean. She bought a coffee from a cart and walked to the duck pond, where she'd sat on the same bench every Sunday for 10 years. The bench was worn smooth beneath her. The wood had a memory of her now, a depression where she always sat left side facing the water. She brought bread for the ducks, even though the sign said not to feed them. Whole wheat torn into small pieces, nothing that would hurt their digestion. The ducks knew her. They waddled over the moment she sat down, quacking, jostling for position. She fed them slowly, one piece at a time, and let her mind go quiet. This was the bargain she'd made with herself. If she never reached for anything, nothing could be taken from her again. If she kept her life small and her desires smaller, she could survive indefinitely. Safety wasn't happiness, but it was something. It was enough. Except it wasn't, not really, and the clay wolf knew it. She returned to the apartment at noon. The building was quiet. Sundays always were. People slept in or went to church or visited family. Normal people with normal lives. Ember unlocked her door, stepped inside, and froze. The air tasted different. Not wrong exactly, but layered. Beneath the familiar smells of her apartment, lavender detergent, old wood, the faint curry scent that drifted up from the Thai grocery, there was something else. Something that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up and her heart kick into a rhythm that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with recognition. Pine, iron, smoke, and beneath it all, a note she had no name for, something ancient and commanding that vibrated in the hollow space behind her sternum, where a wolf should have lived. She dropped her bag. Her hands were shaking. Somewhere in the city, close, impossibly close, a lichen had arrived. Not just any shifter. The scent carried the unmistakable weight of royalty, the pheromone signature of an apex predator whose bloodline predated written history. This was Old Wolf, Alpha Wolf, the kind of wolf that made lesser shifters lower their eyes before they'd even entered the room. Every orphaned instinct in her body screamed a single word she hadn't allowed herself to think in 10 years. Run. She grabbed the go bag from under her bed. It was always packed. 3 changes of clothes, $5,000 in cash, a second set of fake documents, a burner phone. She could be gone in 10 minutes on a bus to Seattle in 30, across the border into Canada by midnight. Her hands were on the doorknob when she stopped. The clay wolf was staring at her from the windowsill, violet glaze, chipped ear, hairline crack running spine to belly, 10 years of silent witness. I can't, she whispered to it. If he finds me, if Marcus finds out. The wolf said nothing, but the crack in its tail seemed deeper than it had been this morning. A fault line widening, something about to break. Ember set the bag down, she didn't know why. Every rational part of her brain screamed to run, to hide, to disappear the way she'd been disappearing for a decade, but something deeper, older, the part of her that dreamed of running on 4 legs refused to move. She walked to the window and looked out at the street. Evening was falling. Streetlights flickered on. A couple walked past hand in hand, laughing. A car drove by, headlights cutting through dusk. Normal, human, safe. And then the wind shifted. The scent hit her full force. Pine and iron and smoke and that nameless thing beneath the frequency that made her bones hum and her vision blur. It was closer now, blocks away, maybe less, moving toward her with the inevitability of a tide. She closed her eyes and felt it. Not with her nose, not exactly, but with the phantom wolf inside her chest. The thing that had been silent for 26 years suddenly stirred, turning its head toward the scent like a flower tracking the sun. Mate. The word detonated in her skull with a violence that made her stagger. Not her thought, not her word, but something primal and undeniable rising from the hollow place where her wolf should have been, a recognition so total it felt like drowning. No. She pressed her forehead against the glass. The window was cold. The city sprawled below, a grid of light and noise and millions of lives that had nothing to do with her. She'd built this. 10 years of invisibility, 10 years of safety. She would not throw it away because some lichen king decided to visit Portland. But even as she thought it, she knew it was a lie. Because the scent was here now, not blocks away, here in the building, on the stairs, and the phantom wolf inside her chest was howling. The knock came at exactly 6:30, 3 sharp raps against hollow wood, measured and deliberate, the sound of someone who expected to be answered. Ember stood frozen in the center of her studio apartment, every muscle locked, her heart hammering against her ribs hard enough to bruise. The go bag sat at her feet. The clay wolf watched from the windowsill. And behind her, a door on the other side of the 3 inches of cheap pine, stood something her body recognized, even if her mind refused to accept it. She didn't move. Maybe if she stayed silent, stayed still, he would think he had the wrong apartment. Maybe he would leave. Maybe I can hear your heartbeat. The voice was low, resonant, carrying through the door like it was made of paper instead of wood. Male, controlled, but underneath the control, something raw. It's faster than a human's. Your scent is coming through the gap under the door, and it's the most extraordinary thing I've encountered in 34 years of life. I'm not leaving. Please open the door, please, an apex predator saying please. The wrongness of it made Ember's hand reach for the deadbolt before her brain caught up. She stopped herself. Go away, I can't, you can. You just turn around and walk back down those stairs and get in whatever car brought you here and leave Portland. I'm nobody. You have the wrong person. Silence. Then quieter, almost to himself, I wish that were true. Something in his voice cracked open a space in Ember's chest she'd kept sealed for a decade. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. The sound of another person carrying weight they hadn't chosen, trying to make it look effortless. She opened the door 6 in keeping the chain engaged. The man on the other side was tall. That was the first thing. Tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dark jeans and a charcoal Henley that looked expensive in the way clothes looked when they were made to last instead of impress. His hair was dark brown, almost black, cut short. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Pale gold, the color of winter sunlight through amber. Lichen eyes, alpha eyes, and they were locked on her with an intensity that made the air between them feel like a living thing. You're her, he said, not a question. Ember's fingers tightened on the door. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just a vet tech. You need to leave before I call the police. The words came out mechanical, rehearsed. She'd practiced this script for 10 years in mirrors and showers and sleepless 3:00 a.m. vigils. I'm human, I'm nobody, you have the wrong person. He took a step closer and the scent hit her full force. Pine and iron and smoke. And underneath it all, something that made every cell in her body lean toward him like he was gravity and she'd been falling her whole life. She could feel his dominance aura now pressing against her skin. Not aggressive, not trying to force submission, just immense. The psychic equivalent of standing at the base of a mountain and realizing the mountain was aware of you. I can hear your heartbeat, he said again. And this time his voice was rough, unsteady. 140 beats per minute. Human resting heart rate is 60 to 100. Your pupils are dilating and contracting in response to my proximity. That's a shifter response to an alpha's aura. And you're sent. He closed his eyes briefly like he was trying to hold on to something slipping away. Wildflowers after rain, riverstone, and something underneath that smells like you've been bleeding quietly for so long you've forgotten what wholeness feels like. Ember's back hit the door frame. Stop. I'm Thuron Nightshade, he said, Lycan King of the Obsidian Sovereignty, and you are my mate. The word hit her like a fist. Mate. The thing she'd stopped believing in the night Marcus burned her mother's locket. The thing she told herself was a fairy tale for wolves who got to have wolves who got to belong to packs and bloodlines and futures that stretched beyond survival. I can't be, her voice cracked. She hated that it cracked. 10 years of not cracking and this stranger undid her in 30 seconds. I'm wolfless. The bond doesn't work without a wolf. This is impossible. And yet, he said quietly, here we are. She slammed the door in his face and threw the deadbolt. Her hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries to get the chain back in place. She backed away from the go bag, stumbled over the go bag, caught herself on the edge of the kitchenette counter. Emma. His voice came through the door, gentle now, almost careful. That's not your real name, is it? She didn't answer, couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up entirely. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because 3 of my wolves went missing in Portland 2 weeks ago. Young scouts barely passed their first shift. We traced them to a trafficking operation and then the trail went cold. Chemical suppressants. Military-grade blockers that burn our sinuses and scramble our tracking. Someone in the city is hunting shifters and I think you know more than you're saying. Ember closed her eyes. Trafficking. The word landed in her stomach like a stone. She thought of Marcus, of the way he'd looked at her the night he exiled her. Not with hatred, with assessment. Like she was a problem he was solving, a variable he was eliminating. I don't know anything about missing scouts, she said. But you know about hiding. It wasn't a question. You've been doing it for a long time, 10 years at least. You've changed your name, your hair, your whole life. You're living like someone's hunting you. And I think whoever you're hiding from might be the same person who took my wolves. She wanted to tell him he was wrong. She wanted to laugh in his face and tell him to take his mate bond and his missing scouts and his impossible gold eyes and leave her alone. But she couldn't because he wasn't wrong. And because the phantom wolf inside her chest was pressing against the space where her ribs met, desperate, aching, reaching toward him like he was the first warm thing it had felt in 26 years. Please, he said again. Just talk to me. 5 minutes. If you still want me to leave after that, I will. You have my word. Ember looked at the clay wolf on the windowsill. The crack in its tail had spread. A hairline fracture now split the body from neck to hindquarters. In 10 years it had never broken. And now, tonight, it was coming apart. She opened the door. Thuron Nightshade filled the doorway like weather. Not because he was trying to intimidate. He stood carefully still, hands visible, posture open, but because presences like his didn't compress. It expanded to fit available space. And her studio apartment had exactly 400 square feet. He stepped inside when she moved back and she watched him take in the room with a single sweep of those gold eyes. The futon that doubled as her bed. The kitchenette with 2 plates, 1 mug, 1 fork. The windowsill where the clay wolf sat. No photographs. No personal items. No scent markers that would betray what she was or wasn't. His gaze lingered on the clay wolf. Something shifted in his expression. Not pity, recognition. You made that, he said, 10 years ago. It's a wolf. I know what it is. He turned to face her and the space between them felt charged electric like the air before a lightning strike. Why violet? It was on sale. That's not why. Ember's jaw tightened. You said 5 minutes. Start talking. He did. His voice was quiet, factual, laying out information like evidence in a trial. 3 scouts missing. Ash, Wren, Cade, River, Finn, Stone, all under 20, all from minor packs. Sent to Portland to monitor rogue activity along the eastern corridor. They'd vanished without a trace. No scent trail, no distress call, nothing but silence that tasted like a trap. Thuron had sent 2 retrieval teams. Both returned empty-handed, their trails ending at walls of chemical interference so dense it burned their sinuses and left them disoriented for hours. Professional work. Someone who understood shifter biology. Someone with resources. So, you came yourself, Ember said. A king doesn't send others to die for mistakes he could prevent. That's not what most kings do. I'm not most kings. She believed him. Hated that she believed him, but she did. There was something in the way he stood, the way he spoke that suggested duty came before ego. It reminded her of the elder wolves in Silverclaw, the ones who'd grown old in service to the pack and carried the weight of it in their shoulders. I still don't know how I can help you, she said. I don't know anything about missing scouts or trafficking operations. But you know about being hunted. Thuron took a step closer, not crowding, just closing the distance enough that she could feel the heat coming off his skin. You know about chemical suppressants. You've been using them, haven't you? To mask your scent, to hide from other shifters. Ember's pulse spiked. I don't know what your apartment doesn't smell like you. He gestured around the room. There's no scent layering, no territorial markers. Most shifters, even without trying, leave traces everywhere they live. Skin cells, sweat pheromones, it builds up over time. It creates a signature. But this place smells like industrial cleaner and nothing else. You've been scrubbing your scent away for years. She said nothing. There was nothing to say that wouldn't confirm what he already knew. Who are you hiding from? He asked quietly. That's not part of the 5 minutes. The 5 minutes are up. You haven't asked me to leave. He was right, she hadn't. And she didn't know why except that the phantom wolf inside her chest had gone quiet for the first time in 10 years. Not silent, but still like it was holding its breath, waiting. My father, she said finally. The words came out flat, emotionless, the way she'd learned to talk about Marcus without falling apart. Alpha of the Silverclaw Pack in Wyoming. He exiled me when I was 16 because my wolf never manifested. Told me if I ever contacted the pack again, he'd kill me. So I disappeared, changed my name, hid. It's not complicated. Thuron went very still. Silverclaw, Marcus Ravenscar, you know him? Everyone knows him. He's been running that territory for 30 years. Ruthless, traditional, rumored to have business dealings that don't stand up to scrutiny. Thuron's eyes narrowed. The chemical signature we found at the abduction site. It matches compounds used in pharmaceutical research. Experimental suppressants designed to block the shift and mute pack bonds. Ember's stomach dropped. You think my father is involved? I think your father is running the operation. The room tilted. Ember reached for the counter, gripped it hard enough that her knuckles went white. She thought of the bonfire, the locket melting. The way Marcus had looked at her like she was an equation he was solving, not his daughter, a problem. If he's trafficking scouts, she said slowly, where is he keeping them? We don't know. The trail ends in Portland, but the holding facility could be anywhere within a 500-mile radius. We need someone who knows his territory, his methods. His tunnels, Ember interrupted. Her voice was distant, echoing like she was hearing herself from underwater. There's a network beneath the eastern ridge of Silverclaw territory. They collapsed in a cave-in when I was 6. Marcus sealed them off, but I explored them when I was a child. Mapped them with chalk and string when I was 10 years old, looking for places where nobody would find me. Thuron's expression sharpened. Are they passable? They were. I don't know about now. It's been 20 years. She looked up at him and the weight clear his throat of what she was about to say pressed against her chest like a physical thing. If he's keeping them anywhere, it's there. Underground, where no scent can escape. Where no one would think to look. Will you help us? The question hung between them. Simple. Impossible. Help us meant going back. Meant facing Marcus. Meant risking everything she'd built, every year of safety, every carefully constructed lie. The clay wolf's crack deepened. Ember heard it, a soft sound like ice fracturing. If I help you, she said, my father will know I'm alive. He'll come for me. Then I'll stand between you and him. Thuron's voice was absolute, unshakable, the kind of promise that carried the weight of a crown behind it. You have my word as Lycan King. He will not touch you. Ember wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly her chest ached with the wanting, but belief was a luxury she'd given up the night she boarded a bus to Portland with nothing but $200 and the smoking ruins of her identity. I need time to think, she said. You have until morning. Thuron pulled a card from his pocket and set it on the counter. Black cardstock, silver lettering, a phone number printed in the center. Call me or don't, but if you decide to run, know that I'll find you. Not because I want to hunt you, because the bond won't let me stop. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. For what it's worth, he said without turning around, I'm sorry for marking you without your consent, for destroying whatever piece you'd built here. My wolf recognized you before my brain did and I lost control. That's not an excuse, it's just the truth. You didn't mark me, Ember said. Thuron turned and his expression was strange, regretful, almost guilty. Look at your wrist. Ember looked down. Her left wrist, the one he'd grabbed in the hallway when she tried to close the door the first time, bore a mark she hadn't noticed before. A silver crescent, faint but visible, the size of a thumbprint. It gleamed against her skin like it was catching light that wasn't there. It'll fade if we don't complete the bond, Thuron said quietly. But it'll hurt both of us. The longer we're apart, the worse it gets. That's how mate bonds work. They're not romantic. They're not kind. They just are. He left. The door clicked shut behind him and Ember stood alone in her apartment with a glowing mark on her wrist and a clay wolf that was quietly breaking apart. She didn't sleep. Couldn't sleep. She sat on the futon with the business card in one hand and her phone in the other, staring at the wall, trying to make a decision that felt impossible. At 3 o'clock in the morning her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. but something, instinct, curiosity, the same reckless impulse that had made her open the door for Thuron, made her swipe to accept. Don't hang up. The voice was male, clipped, efficient, military precision wrapped in a smoker's rasp. My name is Kyle Iron. I'm Thuron Nightshade's chief enforcer. I need you to understand something before you make whatever decision you're agonizing over. How did you get this number? I'm good at my job. Listen, the king hasn't slept, eaten, or spoken to another soul since he left your apartment 6 hours ago. He's sitting in a hotel room 3 blocks from you, tearing the furniture apart with his bare hands because his wolf is in agony from the separation. The mate bond has been initiated, accidental or not, and if you run, it won't break. It will only cause escalating pain until one of you goes feral. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Ember's throat closed. I didn't ask for this. Neither did he, but here we are. A pause, the sound of a lighter, a deep inhale, smoke exhaled. I pulled your scent signature after Thuron identified you. Ran it through the sovereignty's ancestral archives, records that go back 9 centuries. You want to know what I found? No. Your mother was Lyra Moonset, last known carrier of the Lunaris bloodline. Dormant wolf gene. The kind that doesn't manifest at puberty like normal shifters. It waits, sometimes for decades, and when it finally wakes, it's not a normal wolf. It's something the old texts called Moonforged, a wolf whose power comes from the lunar cycle itself. Ember's vision blurred. My mother died when I was 3. Your mother's death certificate says she died in a car crash 23 years ago. But I have surveillance photos from Marcus Ravenscar's compound dated 72 hours ago, and unless corpses have started moving around, Lyra Moonset is very much alive. The phone slipped from Ember's hand. It hit the floor and Kyle's voice kept talking, tinny and distant, but she couldn't hear him over the roaring in her ears. The clay wolf on the windowsill fell. It didn't slip. It didn't get knocked over by wind or vibration. It simply fell like gravity had remembered it existed and hit the hardwood floor. The crack that had been spreading for days split it clean in 2. Ember picked up the phone with shaking hands. Say that again. Lyra Moonset is alive, prisoner in your father's compound for 23 years. We have proof. Thermal imaging, scent analysis, photo evidence. Marcus has been keeping her in a medical facility draining her Lunaris blood for pharmaceutical contracts. Do you know what Lunaris blood is worth on the black market? $2 million a year for 23 years. Your father has made $46 million bleeding your mother dry. Ember couldn't breathe. The room was spinning, tilting, the floor coming up to meet her. She sat down hard on the futon, her free hand pressed against her sternum where the phantom wolf was suddenly thrashing, howling, throwing itself against the walls of its absence with enough force to crack ribs. The missing scouts, Kyle continued relentlessly, are in the same facility. Caged, drained, sold. Your father is a trafficker and he's been running this operation for years. We're mounting a rescue tomorrow night, and you're the only person alive who knows the tunnel system well enough to get us in and out without triggering his defenses. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you're choosing. Run and you live with the knowledge that your mother is dying in a cage while you hide. Help us and you face the man who destroyed you. Either way, the bond will drag you back eventually. Might as well make it count. The line went dead. Ember sat in the dark and stared at the broken clay wolf. 2 halves, violet glaze. The crack ran clean through the center like something had been waiting 10 years to split it apart. She thought about her mother, Lyra with the violet eyes and the gentle hands who taught Ember how to calm frightened animals, who'd sung wolf songs in languages Ember didn't speak, who died when Ember was too young to remember her face outside of photographs. Except she hadn't died. She'd been bleeding in the dark for 23 years while Ember learned to be invisible. The decision wasn't hard. It was the easiest decision Ember had made in a decade. She picked up Thuron's business card and dialed. He answered on the first ring. Ember. My name is Ember Ravenscar, she said. Her voice was steady, cold, the voice of a woman who just remembered she used to have teeth. Daughter of Lyra Moonset, exile of Silverclaw Pack, and I'm going to help you burn my father's operation to the ground. Silence, then quietly, thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for her. I know. When do we leave? There's a helicopter waiting at the Pearl District helipad. Can you be ready in 30 minutes? Ember looked around her apartment. 400 square feet. 10 years, a life built on the foundation of forgetting. She picked up the 2 halves of the clay wolf and wrapped them carefully in a t-shirt, then placed them in the go bag. I'm ready now, she said. The helicopter was matte black, unmarked, the kind of aircraft that didn't appear on flight logs. Thuron waited beside it wearing tactical gear now instead of the Henley, his hair pulled back. He looked older in the harsh light of the helipad floods, tired, like he'd been carrying weight for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to set it down. Kyle Iron stood beside him. Shorter than Thuron, stockier, with a face that looked like it had been broken and reassembled multiple times. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, all silver and raised. He looked at Ember with eyes the color of storm clouds and nodded once. "Ma'am," he said, "don't call me that." "Yes, ma'am." Thuron offered his hand to help her into the helicopter. She ignored it, climbed in herself, buckled into the seat across from him. The rotors started a deafening whine that made conversation impossible. Portland dropped away beneath them, the city lights spreading out like a circuit board, and Ember watched through the window until it disappeared into darkness. They flew east over the Cascades, the mountains rising like broken teeth against the night sky, over high desert, over emptiness that stretched for hundreds of miles. The flight took 4 hours. No one spoke. Thuron sat across from her, his gaze steady, and she felt the mate bond humming between them like a plucked wire. Not painful yet, but present, undeniable. She touched the mark on her wrist. It was warm, warmer than her skin should be, and it was glowing just faintly like bioluminescence in deep water. "Does it hurt?" Thuron asked. She could barely hear him over the rotors. "No, it will if we don't complete the bond." "I know. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. It doesn't change anything." He nodded and looked away. They landed at dawn. The Obsidian Sovereignty's stronghold sat in the Montana Rockies, carved into the mountain itself, Blackpine Keep. Ember had heard of it in the old stories before Marcus exiled her, when she still listened to pack elders talk about Lycan royalty like they were myths. A fortress of black stone and ancient timber that smelled like centuries. 10,000 wolves, the largest pack on the continent, and she was walking into it with a glowing mate mark on her wrist and no wolf to call her own. Kale led the way. Thuron walked beside her, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. The keep's interior was massive. Vaulted ceilings, stone floors worn smooth by generations of paws, tapestries on the walls depicting battles, treaties, coronations, wolves everywhere, guards, servants, families, and every single one of them stopped to stare as Ember passed. She heard the whispers, impossible. Wolfless, defective, embarrassment. Different mouths, same contempt. Thuron's hand found the small of her back, not possessive, grounding. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "I've had practice." He led her to a suite in the keep's eastern wing, private quarters, a bedroom larger than her entire Portland apartment with a fireplace, a balcony overlooking the forest furniture that looked like it had been built by hand from ancient wood. It smelled like him, pine and iron and smoke. "This is your room," he said. "No one will enter without your permission." "You're safe here, am I?" Yes, she wanted to believe him, but safety was a word that had lost its meaning somewhere between Portland and this mountain, and she wasn't sure she'd ever get it back. "The War Council meets in 2 hours, Thuron said. "Rest, eat, I'll have food sent up." He turned to leave. "Thuron," he stopped. "Thank you for coming to get me, for not making me do this alone." Something shifted in his expression, not quite a smile, but close. "You were never going to be alone, not from the moment I caught your scent." He left, the door closed, and Ember stood in the center of a room that belonged to a Lycan queen and tried to remember how to breathe. The War Council met in the Great Hall, a cavernous space hewn from mountain stone, with a ceiling that disappeared into shadows. A table stretched the length of the room, scarred oak that looked old enough to have witnessed the founding of the sovereignty itself. 20 wolves sat around it, their faces hardened by violence and survival eyes that had seen things Ember could only imagine. She stood at the far end beside Thuron, acutely aware that every gaze in the room was fixed on her with varying degrees of skepticism, curiosity, and outright hostility. The mate mark on her wrist pulsed beneath her sleeve, warm and insistent, like a second heartbeat she couldn't silence. An older wolf rose from his seat, 65, maybe older, with silver-streaked hair pulled back and shoulders that still carried the width of a warrior despite his years. His eyes were ice blue, sharp, missing nothing. "This is the mate." His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being heard, not aggressive, just absolute. "The wolfless woman who led our king across state lines on instinct alone, Elder Garrick Frostborn," Thuron said, his tone carefully neutral. "May I present Ember Ravenscar, daughter of Lyra Moonset, exile of Silverclaw Pack." "And yes, my mate." Garrick studied Ember with the intensity of a man evaluating a structural weakness. "No disrespect intended, my king, but a Luna without a wolf is a foundation without stone, structurally unsound." "And then it's fortunate," Ember said, her voice cutting through the murmurs that had started around the table, "that I'm not here to be your Luna. I'm here because my father is trafficking your wolves, and I'm the only person in this room who knows how to get them out alive." Silence dropped like a guillotine blade. Garrick's eyebrows rose. A smile ghosted across his weathered face. "Thuron gone? Direct, I appreciate that." He sat down. "Proceed." Cale Iron stepped forward, moving with the economical grace of a career soldier. He tapped a tablet and the wall behind him lit up with satellite imagery, thermal scans, intercepted communications. The evidence laid out like an autopsy. 2 weeks ago, 3 scouts went missing in Portland, Cale began. His voice was clipped, factual, delivering horror with the same inflection he might use to report weather conditions. Ashran, 18, Cade River, 19, Finstone, 17, all from minor packs sent to monitor rogue activity. They vanished within 72 hours of arrival. No scent trail, no distress calls, just silence. He swiped to the next image, a shipping manifest. Traced chemical signatures at the abduction sites to pharmaceutical-grade suppressants, compounds designed specifically to block the shift-mute pack bonds and render shifters essentially untraceable. Military contracts list them as experimental. Black market price is $50,000 per dose. Another swipe. Financial records, bank transfers, shell corporations. Following the money leads to a network of 6 corrupt alphas across the Western Territories, but the operation centers here. The image changed to aerial photography of Wyoming wilderness, vast and empty, except for a single compound half buried in forest. Silverclaw territory. Alpha Marcus Ravenscar's private holdings. Ember's stomach turned. She recognized the location, the eastern ridge, the place where the tunnels ran like veins beneath stone. Thermal imaging shows underground structures extending at least 3 levels below surface. Cale continued. We estimate capacity for 20 to 30 individuals. Our 3 scouts are there, we're certain, but intelligence suggests Marcus has been running this operation for years. We believe there are additional captives, wolves taken from minor packs, runaways, orphans. People know one reported missing because no one was looking. He looked at Ember, not unkind, but not gentle either. We also have confirmation that Lyra Moonset, reported deceased 23 years ago, is alive and imprisoned in the same facility. Sublevel 3 medical wing. She's been held since Ember was 3 years old. The room erupted. Not with noise, these were apex predators, and apex predators didn't shout, but with a shift in energy so sharp Ember felt it like pressure against her skin. Every wolf in the room went rigid, their eyes flashing gold, their dominance auras flaring with barely controlled rage. A woman halfway down the table slammed her palm against the wood. He's been bleeding a lunar wolf for 23 years. Affirmative, Cale said, and selling children. This from a massive enforcer near Thuron's right, his voice a growl that vibrated in Ember's chest. Caging our young like livestock. For profit, Cale confirmed. Pharmaceutical contracts total approximately $2 million per year from Lyra's blood alone. Scout trafficking adds another $3 to $5 million annually. 23 years of operation. We're talking over $100 million in total revenue. Ember watched their faces. These were hardened warriors, wolves who had killed and bled, and survived by being harder than the world around them. But when Cale displayed photographs of the known captives, young faces hollowed by malnutrition, arms bruised from IV lines, eyes that had gone flat with the particular emptiness of people who had stopped hoping, she watched them flinch. A grizzled enforcer she'd been introduced to as Rune Blackwater closed his eyes and breathed through his nose with the careful control of a man suppressing violence. Thuron's hands curled into fists beneath the table. Through the mate bond, Ember felt his fury match the room's collective rage. His wolf pressed so hard against his skin that his eyes flickered gold for 3 full seconds before he wrenched control back. This is what Ember's father has done, Thuron said quietly. The room fell silent. When a Lycan King spoke in that tone, calm, controlled, absolutely lethal, smart wolves listened. Not just to her, to these children, to Lyra Moonset, to families across the Western Territories. Snort's the question before this council is simple. How do we end it? Garrick leaned forward. Silverclaw has 300 combat-capable wolves. Marcus's enforcers are well-armed and fanatically loyal. A frontal assault would be costly. We'd win, but we'd bleed. Then we don't assault, Ember said. Every head turned. She stepped closer to the table, to the projected map of her childhood territory, and pointed to a section of the eastern ridge. There's a tunnel network beneath this area. My father sealed it after a collapse when I was 6. He thinks it's impassable, but I explored those tunnels as a child, mapped them with chalk and string when I was 10 years old, looking for places where nobody would find me and call me broken. She traced a path with her finger. This entrance, it's overgrown now, probably collapsed at the mouth, but the main passages were stable 20 years ago. A small team could infiltrate, reach the compound's sublevel access, extract the captives, and be out before Marcus knows we're there. And then? Garrick asked. Then we make it public. Ember's voice was cold, flat, the tone of someone who'd moved beyond anger into something colder and more surgical. We broadcast what we find. We bring evidence to the Continental Pack Council. We make it so undeniable that every alpha on this continent has to choose stand with Marcus Ravenscar or stand with the Lycan King. No middle ground, no political maneuvering, just a choice. Rune Blackwater nodded slowly. That's good strategy, but Marcus will deny everything. He'll claim the compound was rogue, that he had no knowledge. He'll sacrifice his lieutenants and walk free. Not if his own daughter testifies, Ember said. The words came out steady. She'd known this was coming from the moment Kale told her Lyra was alive. I'll stand before the Continental Pack Council, reveal my identity, accuse him publicly of trafficking, of imprisoning my mother, of every crime we find. A daughter's testimony carries weight, even a wolfless daughter. The room went colder. She felt it. The exact moment every wolf in the hall understood what she was offering, not just tactical knowledge, not just tunnel maps. She was offering to paint a target on her own back and stand in front of the most powerful alphas on the continent while they decided if she was telling the truth. He'll try to kill you, Thuron said. His voice was quiet, but it carried an edge that made the air vibrate. Ember met his eyes, gold meeting violet. He already killed me when I was 16. Everything after that has been borrowed time, and I'm done borrowing. Something passed between them. Not through the bond, this was simpler, more fundamental, understanding. The recognition of two people who'd both learned that survival sometimes meant choosing which scars you were willing to carry. Thuron turned to the council. We vote, all in favor of Ember's plan? 20 hands rose, not a single abstention. Then we move tomorrow night, Thuron said. Kale organized the teams. Rune coordinate with our intelligence network. I want real-time satellite coverage of Silverclaw territory. Garrick prepare the evidence packets for the Continental Council. And someone get me a structural engineer. If those tunnels have been unstable for 20 years, I want to know exactly what we're walking into. The council dispersed with the efficient silence of wolves who'd done this before. Planned rescues, coordinated strikes, prepared for the possibility that some of them wouldn't come back. Ember watched them go and felt something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not belonging exactly, but purpose. The sense that for the first time in a decade she was moving towards something instead of away. Thuron touched her elbow. Walk with me. They went to the balcony off the Great Hall. Montana stretched below them, endless forest and mountain peaks still capped with snow despite the summer heat. The air tasted clean, sharp, nothing like Portland's exhaust and detergent. This was the air she'd grown up breathing before Marcus took it away. You didn't have to volunteer to testify, Thuron said. He stood beside her at the railing, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. We could have built a case without you. No, you couldn't. Marcus is too smart. He'd have buried the evidence, killed the witnesses, made it disappear. The only way this works is if it's too public to cover up. And for that you need me. I don't want you in danger. I've been in danger for 10 years, at least now I'm choosing it. He turned to face her, and the setting sun caught his eyes, turning them from pale gold to something molten. When this is over, when we've saved your mother and brought Marcus to justice, what do you want? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her what she wanted in so long she'd forgot the question was supposed to have an answer. I want Sundays, she said finally. The words came out quieter than she intended. Feeding ducks in a park, sitting on a warm bench, not waiting for something, just being. I can give you that. Can a Lycan king take Sundays off? Thuron's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, but was close enough to hurt. For you, I'll rewrite every rule. The mate bond flared between them, warm and insistent, pulling like a tide. Ember felt it in her chest, in her wrist, where the mark glowed faint silver in the hollow place where her wolf should have been. The phantom inside her stirred, turning toward Thuron like he was the sun, and she'd been living in shadow. She stepped back before she could do something stupid, like kiss him, like let herself believe this could be real. I should rest, she said. Tomorrow's going to be long. Ember, she stopped. Thank you for trusting me, for coming here, for being braver than anyone has a right to ask. She didn't answer, just nodded and walked back inside before the thing in her chest could break open entirely. Her suite was exactly as she'd left it. Someone had brought food while she was in the council meeting, a plate of roasted meat, root vegetables, bread still warm from the oven. Her stomach growled. She couldn't remember the last time she'd eat. Portland felt like years ago instead of hours. She ate mechanically, tasting nothing. Her mind already in those tunnels, already mapping routes, calculating risks. The broken clay wolf sat on the nightstand where she'd placed it. 2 halves. She picked them up, fit them together. The crack was clean. If she had the right adhesive, she could fix it, make it whole again. But she didn't want to fix it. The crack was honest. The crack was true. Someone knocked. 3 raps, soft and measured. Come in. Kale Iron entered carrying a tactical vest and a headlamp. He set them on the chair by the door. Equipment for tomorrow. The vest is Kevlar reinforced with ceramic trauma plates. Won't stop a high-caliber round, but it'll keep you alive through most things. Headlamp has a red filter option, better for preserving night vision in the tunnels. Thank you. He nodded, started to leave, then paused. Can I ask you something? Go ahead. Why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's just for your mother. I've been doing this job long enough to recognize when someone's settling accounts. Ember set down the clay wolf. When Marcus exiled me, he told the pack I was nothing, worthless, a mistake that didn't deserve to exist. And for 10 years I believed him. I made myself small and quiet and invisible because I thought that's what I deserved. but those captives in those cages, they're me. What I could have been if Marcus had found a way to profit from my brokenness instead of just discarding it, and I'm done letting him decide who gets to be worth something. Cale studied her for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. Not a big smile, just a slight upturn at the corner of his mouth, barely visible beneath the scar tissue. You're going to make a hell of a Luna. I don't have a wolf. You don't need one. You've got something better. What's that? Spine. He laughed. Ember stood alone in the suite and looked at her reflection in the darkened window. A woman of 26 with violet eyes and a jawline that still carried the sharp angles of her mother's face. She looked tired, scared, but not broken. Not anymore. At noon the next day, the infiltration team assembled in the armory. 12 wolves total. Cale led the briefing with the precision of a man who'd run operations like this 100 times and knew that every detail mattered, that one missed variable could mean the difference between extraction and execution. Primary team, he said, pointing to a map projection on the wall. Myself, Rune, 8 enforcers, and Ember as navigator. Secondary team, Thuron, you'll lead a diversion at the compound's north entrance. Draw Marcus's forces away from the sublevels. Timing is critical. We go in at 2200, new moon, minimal light. Chemical suppressants will be in play, so don't rely on scent tracking. Use thermals, use sound, use your eyes. Questions? A young enforcer Ember hadn't met raised his hand. What if the tunnels have collapsed? What if we get down there and can't reach the holding cells? Cale looked at Ember. Then we dig, she said simply. Or we find another way, but we don't leave without them. The enforcer nodded, satisfied. They loaded into 3 black SUVs at dusk. Ember rode with Cale and Rune, the silence in the vehicle heavy with premission tension. She checked her gear for the 3rd time. Tactical vest, headlamp, knife on her belt, radio on her shoulder, gloves. She'd never worn gear like this, never trained for combat. But her hands moved with muscle memory borrowed from 10 years of handling frightened animals, and the principle was the same. Stay calm, move deliberately, don't project fear. The drive took 6 hours. They parked 3 miles from Silverclaw territory and hiked the rest. Forest closed around them, black pines so tall their tops disappeared into darkness. Ember's chest constricted. This forest, she knew this forest, had run through it as a child back when she still believed her wolf would come back, when belonging felt possible. The tunnel entrance was exactly where she remembered. Overgrown with 20 years of brush, the opening barely visible beneath moss and fallen branches. Cale's team cleared it in silence, revealing a gap in the stone just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. Ember went first, clicked on her headlamp. Red light washed over limestone walls slick with moisture, over formations that looked like frozen waterfalls, over darknesses that swallowed sound. The air smelled like iron and clay, and the deep fungal musk of earth that hadn't seen sunlight in decades. Her childhood came back in pieces. Chalk marks on stone, barely visible now, but still there. The fork where she'd gone left and gotten lost for 4 hours until her mother found her, not angry, just relieved. The chamber where bats roosted, their chittering echoing off vaulted ceilings. This way, she whispered, and the team followed single file, their shoulders brushing stone on both sides. They descended for 30 minutes. The passages grew tighter, colder. Ember's lungs burned from the thin air and the effort of climbing over rubble, squeezing through gaps that had narrowed with time. Behind her she heard Rune's labored breathing, heard the scrape of tactical gear against limestone, heard the whispered curses of wolves built for open ground, not subterranean crawling. The passage opened into a chamber Ember didn't recognize. Newer construction, concrete walls, led lighting strips that flickered with failing power. They'd reached the compound's lower levels. Cale signaled. The team split. 4 enforcers stayed to secure the exit. The rest moved deeper. The sublevel quarters were sterile white tile, fluorescent lights. The smell hit Ember like fist, antiseptic and copper, and the chemical tang of sedatives underlaid by something worse. The stale, despairing scent of wolves who had stopped believing rescue would come. Snorts they found the captives on sublevel 2. 9 of them, cages. Actual cages, steel-barred and bolted to concrete. Young wolves, some barely into their late teens, emaciated with IV lines running from their arms to collection bags labeled with clinical precision. Batch numbers, volume measurements, harvest dates. Ember's stomach turned. One of the captives, a girl with auburn hair matted to her skull, whimpered when Cale's wolves approached. Her body had been so conditioned to pain that even rescue felt like a threat. Ember knelt beside her cage and read the placard. Ash Wren, 18, the scout from Portland. You're safe, Ember said, pouring every ounce of calm into her voice. The same calm that stilled terrified dogs and silenced howling cats. The frequency that animals trusted even when humans couldn't hear it. We're getting you out, I promise. Ash's eyes focused. Her breathing slowed. She looked at Ember with an expression that would haunt her for years. The bewildered gratitude of a creature that had forgotten kindness existed. I'm Ember, she said softly. And you're going home. Kale's team cut the locks. The captives were in bad shape, dehydrated, malnourished, 3 of them unconscious. Rune identified the other 2 missing scouts, Cade River and Finn Stone, both 19, both barely responsive. The remaining 6 were exactly what Kale had predicted, runaways, orphans, wolves from minor packs that Marcus had taken over the years. People no one had reported missing because no one was looking. Rune radioed for medical extraction. They had maybe 10 minutes before Marcus's security noticed the breach. Sublevel 3, Ember said. My mother's there, I'm going down. Negative, Kale said. We extract these 9 first. Then I didn't come this far to leave her. Ember was already moving toward the stairs, headlamp cutting through darkness. You get them out, I'll get her. Ember, she didn't stop, couldn't stop. Her mother was 1 floor below, had been 1 floor below for 23 years, while Ember learned to be nothing, and she was done with leaving people behind. Sublevel 3 was worse. Medical equipment, exam tables with restraints, refrigerators labeled samples of lichen serum batch 47. Ember's hands shook. She forced them still. Not now, she could fall apart later. Right now, she needed to move. The isolation cell was at the end of the corridor. Coded lock. Ember didn't have time for finesse. She grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and smashed the panel. Sparks flew. The lock disengaged with a mechanical click that echoed down the sterile hallway. The door opened. The door to mate Lyra Moonset sat on a concrete bench chained to the wall by silver cuffs that had burned her wrists raw. She was emaciated, her once black hair streaked with gray, her skin pale from decades without sunlight. But her eyes were still violet, still luminous, still carrying that otherworldly quality that marked the Lunaris bloodline. She looked up when Ember entered, and for a moment that stretched into eternity, neither of them moved. Moon daughter, Lyra whispered. Her voice was broken, raspy from disuse, but underneath it was the same voice that had sung lullabies when Ember was 3. The same voice that lived in the few memories Ember had managed to keep. You came. Ember's knees gave out. She dropped to the floor beside her mother, fumbling with the silver chains, her hands shaking so badly she could barely grip them. I thought you were dead. 23 years I thought. I sent you dreams. Lyra's hands, skeletal and weak, touched Ember's face. The forest, the running. Did you feel me? Every night. You haven't shifted. It wasn't a question. Lyra's eyes saw everything the way they always had. He kept his threat. He suppressed your wolf before you were born. Injected me with the compound when I was pregnant. It's in your DNA. Ember's chest seized. Then I'll never. The Lunaris bloodline is stronger. Lyra coughed and blood flecked her lips. The awakening just needs the right catalyst. Face your fear with your truest bond. The trial is written in our history. You're not broken, my moon daughter. You're becoming. Footsteps in the corridor. Heavy, multiple. Kale's voice crackling through Ember's radio. We've been made. Marcus's enforcers are flooding the sublevels. Extraction team is moving the captives now, but you need to get out. Ember, do you copy? Ember got the chains off. Lyra collapsed into her arms, light as paper, her body wrecked by decades of captivity. Can you walk? I can try. They made it 5 feet before the corridor filled with wolves, 40 of them. Marcus's elite guard, armed with tranquilizer guns, loaded with the same chemical suppressants that had taken down 2 sovereignty retrieval teams. They surrounded Ember and Lyra with the clinical efficiency of men who'd done this before, who'd caged and processed and shipped enough wolves to know exactly how much force was required. And behind them, stepping through the fluorescent-lit corridor like he owned not just the compound, but the very air inside it, came Marcus Ravenscar. He looked older than Ember remembered. 68 now, his hair more silver than brown, his face carved with the deep lines of a man who'd spent clear as throat 40 years holding power through violence and cunning. But his eyes were the same. Cold, assessing, looking at Ember the way he'd looked at her the night of the severance ceremony. Like she was a problem, a variable, something to be eliminated. The wolfless runt, he said. His voice carried the alpha harmonic that made every shifter in the corridor flinch, made Ember's knees want to buckle, made the phantom wolf in her chest cower, crawling back through the dirt like the animal she never became, and dragging her broken mother with her. How poetic. Ember set Lyra down carefully, stepped in front of her. It's over, Marcus. The Lichen King knows what you've done. He has evidence. Witness testimony. Financial records. 9 captives are being extracted as we speak. You're finished, Marcus laughed. It was the laugh she remembered from childhood, the one that preceded punishment, the one that said, I will break you and enjoy it. You think I'm afraid of councils and kings? I've been running this territory for 40 years. I'll bury your Lichen King in appeals and favors, and in 5 years no one will even remember this happened. They'll remember me. Ember's voice was steady, cold. They'll remember that you exiled your own daughter for being wolfless, that you imprisoned your mate for 23 years and bled her for profit, that you trafficked children. I'm going to stand in front of the Continental Pack Council and tell them everything. And you can't alpha command your way out of the truth? Something flickered in Marcus's eyes, not fear, but recognition. The realization that the daughter he'd discarded had grown teeth. You'll always be nothing, he snarled. And then he launched his alpha command at her with the full weight of his dominance. A psychic blast designed to shatter her will, to force her to her knees, to prove in front of 40 wolves that she was still the broken girl he'd thrown away. The command hit like a tsunami. Ember's knees buckled. Pain exploded in her chest, not from the command itself, but from something inside her answering it. The hollow place behind her sternum, the void she'd carried for 26 years, suddenly ignited. Heat. Not phantom ache, not ghost instinct, but alive. A roar compressed into a seed, a wildfire folded into her DNA, and it was unfolding now with the inevitability of something that had always been there waiting for permission to exist. Her spine arched. Vision fractured. The alpha command crashed against her like a wave against stone, and instead of breaking her, it broke against something that had been sleeping inside her since before she was born. The heat expanded. Her muscles tore. Her bones sang with a frequency that made the fluorescent lights shatter, raining glass across tile. Kale's voice was screaming through her radio. Something about Thuron, about the diversion team breaching the compound's north entrance, about holding position, but she couldn't hear it over the roaring in her skull. Through the mate bond, miles away at the compound's perrim,